episode number 5. And on this particular one, I want us to get a little bit more detailed. On the last episode, y'all guys will remember we broke down this idea of worship of spirits. Now, if you actually look through the list of the episodes that we did, shout out to the cameraman on the other side, you guys will remember that we had a few points that we mentioned on the previous episodes that we did. Now, point number 1 was Banaba Metsi being a subject matter that came to fruition. We saw it in Makazi's statement as she spoke about her being, Wanasio. So, Wanataben, basically. You could kind of put it like that. And then we made it a little bit of an effort to kind of come back and actually break down who is Wanameti. And you saw we spoke about Mimulus. We'll get back to that particular subject. Before we describe the worship of this being in the mountains and in the heights, I got some stuff that I want to show you on the screen on the side here. But before we actually do that, let me remember to do due diligence. It's the Reality Show, the Daily Christian Commentary videos. If it's the first time over here, do be sure to check out some of the videos that are down in the pinned comments, and I'm going to check you out. Where else, if not over there, on the pinned comments. Now, right after this one, I'll then do episode number 6. So this is episode number 5. On episode 1, we spoke about Banaba Metsi. What's that? What is going on over there? Episode number 2, we spoke about the departure of God from doctrine in the Mandems, pastors in particular, people that were leaders. They were departing away from letting the gospel be focused on God. And then in episode number 3, we went a little bit deep in there and we spoke about the unknown God. The importance of us speaking about the unknown God was actually seen in episode number 5, in episode number 4. And in episode number 4, we spoke about Hudisani Ravere's description of what she worshipped. She described it, if you can remember, in this particular episode over here, as spirit. She said worship of spirit. And she speaks about us so descriptive. We have a soul of what. But when it comes to God, there is no description. Now, I found that quite interesting, that how do we have so much information about ourselves, but we have no information about God? In this episode, I want to give you guys some of these answers. In the worship of spirit, as I've stated, you'll remember I mentioned in episode 2, the intention is to make the sacred church the public church. So on this episode, I want to show that how do they do that? How do they achieve that? They put things before us for us to worship or pay homage to away from God. So they take us and drive us away, and they put us in the worship of men. And that actually gets seen somewhere. I'm going to start it off in the Roman Catholic Church, then I'll come to Sangomas, then I'll come to Provovo. Now, the reason why I want to go that route is so that I can show either false prophets, you can name it, false prophets, Sangomas, or spiritualists who are away from religion. They all drive to the same thing, driving people away from God. Now remember, in John chapter number 1, it emphasizes that when Jesus came to his own, they did not receive him. But to those that receive him, speaking about us who come to salvation, he gave the right. There was a right to be a son. You don't just become a son. You were given a right to be a son in your faith. Now, those that rejected him, those which were kind of like part of the Jewish faith or believed in the Jewish faith, they departed themselves from it. Notice here, this clip that I want to show you here. And before we go to that verse, 1 Timothy chapter number 4 gives us an highlight of something. We will come back to 1 Timothy chapter number 4 just in a second. The reason why I want to come back to that verse is because it tells us what's going on presently. So, first, let's go to the Catholic Church. There was this video that I showed you guys some time ago. And the goal of showing you this video was to highlight how they put elements of worship in front of us, and we are worshiping those things and we don't even realize it's far away from God. Notice what was said in this video.
Every church is required by church law, which is called canon law, to have a first-class relic of a saint or martyr in the altar.
Here in this altar, as you can see, the relic was put in the base of the altar. Generally, an altar is composed of a base and what we call the mensa, or the table on which Mass is celebrated.
So what you just heard there is a priest from the Catholic Church saying that they put something at the front of that pulpit thing, the altar that they have in their churches. They put this in front. It's at the front. And remember, the goal here is to remember that every single time a Catholic walks into the temple or into their church, they bow. You do not, okay? I repeat, you can ask any Catholic, they'll tell you this. You don't enter the Catholic Church without bowing. You enter, then you bow. And then you go and do whatever you want to do, whether you are entering to do something, but the moment you enter, you bow to the front of that altar. Now, if you are bound to the front of that altar and you are being told here that there is a relic, so basically if Ricky lived with this remote, behold, behold the element of thy worship. So they will take this remote, place it all the way into the altar. By so doing, every single time you're bowing to the altar, you are bowing to an element, a physical element in this earth of someone who is departed, dead, and now in the grave. And that person who is dead, now in the grave, has become an element of worship. Not long ago, we did an episode with us, Portia, and she mentioned this thing, that there are people who grow in the cult to a position of being masters. You know, how T.B. Joshua was kind of addressed. But anyways, that's not where we are. And when you get to that particular, you have the right of initiating others. So I find it quite interesting. In the Catholic Church, they have this thing of relics where something that belonged to someone will be taken, put into thing. Now, look at it from the side of Sangoma. Sangomas, they use bones of the dead, bones of dead animals, and shells from the sea, and they bring those to throw on the ground so that they can then consult whatever spirit they're in subjection to give you a message. I'll come back to this particular point with the verse. Now, let's continue with this particular message that he was saying here.
Here you can see where the relic has been placed inside the base of the altar. And generally, that's what's done. A hole is cut out, the relic is inserted, and then a covering is put with a cross to mark the place, and then it's cemented in so it cannot be easily taken out.
So notice there, according to the priest, they cut a hole on the altar, so the altar that you are bowing to, which now contains an element of worship of an individual or a spirit. Spirit, remember in the previous episode, this idea of worshiping spirit, like there you see. Now, you are in worship of a relic that belonged to a person who was alive, dead, now passed on to the other side, and which is the same thing that Sangomas are doing. They now take these elements of things that are dead, bring them into their worship, and those become center of creating communication. It's no different to what you are hearing over here. The difference here is that it's put on an altar in front of the church where people are thinking. Now, remember, the Bible had actually warned. If you guys can remember, in Exodus, you know, the famous 10 Commandments. What do the 10 Commandments actually put out? If you go back down there, the 10 Commandments make it very clear. Let it be focused a little bit. Thou shalt not make yourself an image in a form of anything in heaven above, okay? In heaven above, and remember please, remember, the devil deals in deception. And if he's dealing deception, he dangles something in front of you for you to pay homage to, not realizing that it's actually, let's go back there, okay? So thou shalt not make for yourself, hey, the microphone is becoming far. Thou shalt not make for yourself an image in a form of anything in heaven above or the earth beneath. So notice there, the people who are dead are under the ground. Do not make yourself any image. Be in focus, please. Do not make yourself any image that is replicating something that is up there or things that are under. So these particular rules that we were given, the Ten Commandments, or that the Jews were given particularly, they highlighted what we will later see in 1 John. In 1 John, if you guys remember that verse, it highlights something here. 1 John says, beloved, okay, do not believe every spirit. And remember, while we are being subjected to the worship of spirits, right here you can see how they are doing it in the Catholic Church. They put a relic in the altar that you're going to be in church worshiping with. Sorry if I disturb the audio here, but I think it's best I hold this microphone right now. As the pastor always says when he's in church, I'm about to finish. Okay? So remember, this verse actually gives us an example of something that's happening. He says, do not believe every spirit, but rather test every spirit, whether they be from God. Now, why is it important we test the spirits of whether they be of God? If you go back into what he had said in Exodus, and you realize that in Exodus he forbids the creation of images that we will then look at or look up unto. If you realize that Abangomeni, what do? They take shells and all these things. They take bones of dead things and all these things in order to create this communication. And now you are being told that those things are creating a communication barrier between you and your ancestors. Okay? First line of thinking. Now they will have their own form of defense and so forth. But notice that the verse warns against doing things that are actually mimicking things that are below. And then he says that you should not bow yourself to them. So what happens when you are consulting? You are bowing your authority to these things. So the worship that is unknown now from the previous episode that we spoke about has been defined because now it's directed. And to whom is it directed? Oh yeah, don't get it twisted. Because if God, according to this verse here, it tells you, for God is a jealous God. Now, why does it tell you that? Why does it tell you that God is a jealous God? It tells you that because you may not realize that if in taking that image and placing it before you, you have created an idol. Okay? Now, we may not understand all these spiritual aspects of these things, but there's a reason why that law says do not create images for yourself that are thingy. Because why? Once you get into that, there are spirits right there or in that plane, and many false prophets have gone out into the world. Why? These are evangelists for the spirits. That's why you will see things that are in church that you don't recognize. You see people rolling on the ground. You see these are foreign spirits. You see people taking bones from dead people, and then, or not necessarily bones from dead people, but bones from dead animals and shells from the sea in order to create communication. And in this effort of them, what are they? They are showing what they're evangelizing. He says, you test the spirits whether they be from God. And how do you test it that way? By testing them by doctrine, you will know that this is not of God. So everything must conform itself to what you see in God. Now, you'll remember, last I mentioned something from the video that Ausmpumi did with Aushudisani. Now, there's something that there was a question she asked, and I want to bring it back here in alignment with this thing here. This is the question here.
And now you had the intention of apologizing. shows me that you're so in touch spiritually, that it's no longer religion for you to do certain things, but listening to that inner voice. And but the fact that you can still hear it, the fact that it bugs you, means you're really, really aware. Because we can get to a point where we ignore that voice so much that it doesn't matter at all.
I think that's why for me spirituality is more important than religion.
Yeah.
You know, religion has its place and its space.
Yeah.
And it's each to their own. But spirituality, just an understanding of spirit and an understanding that there is something bigger than you.
Yeah.
Now, you guys would remember I mentioned they're so well descriptive about everything else, but when it comes to God, not much description that is given there. What's going on? Why is it that there is very little description that is given to God? It's because it's this unknown. They placed an element of worship that is from the beyond, okay? By worshiping an unknown God, you are worshiping something. It's just not God. That's why they like people who are from Sangoma. They like talking about, Christians can't claim God. It's not that we are claiming God. We are telling you where God has said he is. It's not claiming him. He has said, this is how I will be worshipped. I will not be worshipped by any other form. Even if you read in Hebrews chapter number 1, let me see. If we go here, Hebrews number 1, Hebrews, let me Google it. Hebrews chapter number 1, you'll remember how it starts. The most important part is how does the verse start. And so if we go KJV there, he says, God who in various times and in various ways spoke in time past to our fathers by the prophets, has in this last day spoken to us through his Son. You see, if you take this out here, okay, let's be very clear. If you take out the relevance of the Son there, okay, I see it wants to highlight itself, okay. So if you take out the Son there, the element of the Son, you create an error, you create a problem. And the verse warns, he spoke to us in various ways, but now communicates in one way. And so we are creating an error, or we are creating a problem by being dependent on something that we don't know. Just spirit, we just worship spirit. Notice that in the Catholic Church, they placed something before. They placed something. So you are worshiping whatever you're worshiping, whatever you're bowing to, but they've placed something in front that tells you what you're worshiping. And because that thing that you are seeing then, it's not Christian, it should allow you to understand that you are no longer in worship to God. The same way you hear Asudisani here, explaining this particular thing that, you're just listening to spirit, as Mpumi puts it. You're just listening to spirit. Pastor Lani, there is a lot of deception. The Bible says the heart of man is terribly wicked. Who can know it? Meaning I cannot trust my heart. There are aspects of my heart not to be trusted. It gets very dangerous listening to my heart. And so I have to be very careful with what the Bible actually puts out. I thought this was quite an interesting one, and I wanted to put it out here so that you guys can see where are we going with the series. What's the intention? The intention is to be very intentional about what you say or what you claim that you are worshiping. If you say you are worshiping the God of the God of the Bible, be very clear about that. Okay, this whole thing of they are doing Bungoma, and then they are then adding Christianity. You are adding problems. That's what you are adding. Okay, because there is only one. He says he spoke to us in various ways. By now he speaks to us through his Son. It's Ricky. I hope this video finds you well. It's important we become descriptive, because when we become vague, it creates problems. You see, Catholicism is vague. That's why it has that. Now, if I actually go back here, before I actually leave, I was just looking into this entire thing. I didn't know. The Catholics have this thing called a code of canon law. And basically what it is that they have rules by which they determine how making someone part of the canon of the saints. Okay? That a person it will be sealed that a person is a saint. Bazalan, a bunch of deception. I could not overemphasize that. But hey, you know what? People are going to get into what they want to get into. In this episode, the goal was to show you that the confusion here, it's mixing. And once they mix, they make you not to be descriptive. That's why in all efforts of people in the ecumenical movement, the goal is always to create confusion in doctrine. If Muslims are clear on this aspect of doctrine, they would rather create confusion in that. And if Christians are clear on this aspect of doctrine, they would rather create confusion in that. And so what you're seeing here is that these people, in their intention or in their goals to stray away from dogma and clarity, they have created another God. And this is not new, by the way. The idea that people can create their own God, if you read in Romans, it's very clear in Romans that you can come to a place where you've demeaned God and you've created your own version. Okay? Must be very clear. We must be very careful not to fall for that. It's Ricky, and I'll see you on later on. Y'all have a good one.